Good morning, everybody. A few minutes ago, I shouldn't have said a few minutes ago, a few months ago, we held a hearing where we heard from state law enforcement officers about the challenges and risks that drones can pose when those drones are in the wrong hands. Today's witnesses are career federal government professionals who are instrumental in keeping our public officials, our borders, and our border communities safe. As drone use continues to proliferate, our witnesses' work grows more and more important. We all know the federal government can't be everywhere at once. This was made clear in our last hearing on this topic. As Congress considers expanding counter-drone authorities to appropriately train in state and local law enforcement, the first step to expanding and enhancing counter-drone authorities is to ensure that the federal authorities currently in place are meaningfully extended. This is necessary so that our law enforcement agencies have a proper authority to devote resources to this critical mission. Drones aren't going anywhere, and we should embrace the innovation that they bring. But as with any technology, they can be exploited by those who seek to do harm to others. Bad actors use drones to smuggle weapons and drugs across our border, spy on sensitive facilities, commit acts of terror, and a lot more. In 2018, most of us serving on this committee, including this senator and Senator Durbin, the ranking member, voted to grant advanced Counter-UAS authorities to the Department of Justice and Homeland Security for public safety functions. These authorities have been extended temporarily 8 times since they were originally signed into law in 2018, which is a testament to their importance. Congress must ensure that these authorities don't lapse and that our law enforcement agencies maintain the tools and the resources to defend our communities from those who might use rapidly developing drone technologies to cause harm. These authorities should be employed by responsible professionals who aren't afraid of oversight and accountability. While cartels and other criminal enterprises use drones for illegal purposes without restraint, the government's authority to mitigate them expires at the end of September. So it's our responsibility to ensure that law enforcement maintains the tools they need to address the threats. In 2011, the FBI arrested a terrorist before he had the chance to fly explosive-laden drones into the U.S. Capitol. Also, we should not leave our crowded stadiums and communities vulnerable to the next terrorist who can purchase a drone online. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today, and now it's Ranking Member Durbin's turn.
Thanks, Chairman Grassley, for holding this hearing to highlight the need to better combat the threat posed by unmanned aircraft systems known as drones. As the use of these drones continues to increase, the conversations are more important than ever. However, I want to first note that while we have witnesses from the Trump administration, and they are welcome, this committee has yet to hear from the Homeland Security Secretary Noem on this issue and a broad array of other critical issues. Secretary Noem is overseeing an unprecedented national campaign of mass deportations. She should answer for the indiscriminate arrests of law-abiding citizens by masked officials, and even the arrest and detention of U.S. citizens, including veterans. Why do I bring this up today? Because this administration is diverting federal law enforcement away from countering threats to our nation in order to participate in this mass deportation campaign. Don't take it from me. Listen to what federal agents tell us. According to one, quote, Homeland Security investigation supervisors have waived agents off new cases so they have more time to make immigration enforcement arrests. One veteran agent said, and I quote, no drug cases, no human trafficking, no child exploitation. It's infuriating. Instead, he said, Department of Homeland Security is, quote, arresting gardeners, close quote. As we'll discuss today, there's a real threat posed by hostile foreign nations, cartels, and other malign actors exploiting drone technology for espionage, cyber attacks, and drug and weapons trafficking. So we need to hear from Secretary Noem about why she's shifting the focus of the agency she leads away from these threats to our homeland in order to arrest immigrants with no criminal record or deep roots in this country. On the subject of drones, the FAA reports that over 1 million drones are currently registered in the United States for a broad range of commercial and recreational activity, from farming to photography to journalism. Law enforcement and government agencies also use drones for search and rescue, disasters, surveillance of criminal activity, and even traffic enforcement. But like any technology, drones can also be dangerous. Drone operators can create hazards simply by flying in restricted areas, even if they do so by accident. Criminals and foreign adversaries also use drones for cyber attacks, espionage, transportation of drugs, weapons, and other contraband, including into prisons and across our borders. As drone technology advances, the risk of bad actors causing serious harm increases. Drones can be rigged with firearms, explosives, even chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons. For example, if I'm sitting at Wrigley Field in Chicago during a ball game with my grandkids and see a drone in the sky, I want to know the drone is safe and is authorized to be there. Currently, the Department of Justice and Homeland Security are 2 of 4 federal agencies with drone detection and mitigation authority. These authorities allow DOJ and DHS to detect, track, monitor, seize, and even destroy drones that pose a credible threat, such as to federal courthouses, prisons, and mass gatherings. The challenge we face now is how to update these authorities to enable law enforcement to protect us from nefarious drone activity without endangering civilian air traffic, people, or property on the ground, and basically to also honor our First and Fourth Amendment. Addressing the threats proposed by drones will require carefully tailored authorities with strong safeguards. I hope today's hearing will be a step forward to reach a bipartisan bicameral agreement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Before I introduce the witnesses, we hear a lot about the discussion of Trump's administration's commitment to faithfully executing the laws. Soft on crime policies aren't humane for anyone. Criminal networks cowardly exploit migrants to carry out their criminal activity, and women and children are routinely abused. We must remove the incentives for illegal immigration, and actually enforcing immigration laws is very essential. The Trump administration's Homeland Security Task Force understands the scopes of these problems and are securing our communities as well as our border. I'm going to introduce our first witness. Will be Christopher Hardee, who was the Chief of Office of Law and Policy at the Department of Justice National Security Division, a position that he's held since 2013. A career government attorney with 24 years of service. He's worked across multiple Department of Justice divisions and specializes in national security, legal, and policy issues, including counterterrorism, cyber policy, and the law of armed conflict. Next, we have Micheal Torphy, who is Unit Chief of the FBI's UAS and Counter-UAS programs. Mr. Torphy has been with the FBI for over 19 years and previously led the Bureau's aviation security program here in Washington, D.C. Prior to that, he conducted national security and violent crime investigations in various field offices across the country. Finally, we have Steve Willoughby, who is acting director of the Department of Homeland Security's Counter-UAS program office, where he focuses upon strategic planning for air domain awareness, threat mitigation, and interagency information sharing. Mr. Willoughby previously served as Director of Aviation and Surface Transportation for the White House National Security Council, advising senior leadership on unmanned systems, international transport agreements, and incident response. I'm going to have to ask you to stand so that I can swear you. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. Yeah, they all answered affirmatively. So please sit down and go the way that I introduced you. Before you first speak, I should thank all of you for taking the time not only to be here, but for your preparation for today's hearing. I know you put a lot of work into it. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Mr. Hardee.
Good afternoon, Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Durbin, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for inviting the Department of Justice to testify about mitigating drone threats.
Would you please pull your microphone a little closer?
This committee has led the way to give the department authority to conduct effective counter-drone operations. Chairman Grassley has introduced important legislation to fill related gaps in the criminal code. We value your leadership. We look forward to supporting the committee's work as we have over several years. Integrating drones into our airspace is an enormous economic opportunity. But as our written statement illustrates, if we don't build security into that framework, this technology will pose threats to government facilities and assets, critical infrastructure, and the public. Drone technology now shapes conflicts from Ukraine to Yemen, with armed conflict fueling rapid innovation. These lethal innovations are coming here. Mitigating the threat requires a layered approach to security. To this end, we work closely with our partners at the FAA and DHS. Mitigating the threat also requires the resources of non-federal law enforcement. Private owners of critical infrastructure also play an important role. Congress set the foundation for federal protection activities in the Emerging Threats Act of 2018. Since then, together with DHS and FAA, we have briefed Congress about the growing threat and how we use the 2018 law. We have testified about the need to expand that authority. We also need to make it more durable so we can invest in these capabilities. Congress has adopted a series of short-term extensions. The law sunsets on September 30th. We appreciate these extensions. We must retain our existing authority. We also need to enhance the law to support the layered federal-state approach required to protect the public. The 2018 Act provides clear legal authority for counter-drone operations conducted by DOJ and DHS. The authority is limited to specific missions and is subject to detailed requirements. Without that authority, the most effective types of drone detection and counter-drone activities could violate criminal laws. For example, laws like the Aircraft Sabotage Act and the Wiretap Act. However, the Act applies only to specific DOJ and DHS missions. We support enhancing the law to apply to additional important missions, to include airports, critical infrastructure like power plants and chemical facilities, and high-risk prisoner transports. We also support allowing non-federal law enforcement and owners of critical infrastructure to use approved detection-only equipment. That technology is essential to develop a threat picture around their facilities. The technology detects communications passed between the operator's controller and the drone. The systems do not extract or intercept text messages, email, internet search histories, or call information from phones or tablets used to control the drones. In our view, the benefits are great, while the privacy risks are low for that type of technology. We also support allowing certain approved and trained non-federal law enforcement agencies to use the full range of counter-drone capabilities. That would include mitigation. This is essential to protect more large, high-risk sporting events and other mass gatherings and state prisons. Turning to the criminal laws that apply to drones, we have supported Chairman Grassley's passed bill to fill the gaps in the criminal code. Few criminal laws apply specifically to drones. Penalties are generally too low. We look forward to working with the chairman and the rest of the committee on these issues. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. I am pleased to answer your questions. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Durbin, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, alongside our partners from the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security. My name is Micheal Torphy. I am a Supervisory Special Agent and Unit Chief in the FBI's Critical Incident Response Group, where I oversee unmanned aircraft systems and counter-UAS operational programs. I'm here today to speak about the FBI's operational efforts to detect and mitigate the malicious use of unmanned aircraft systems. Our adversaries actively seek to exploit gaps in our security framework. That's why it is essential that we protect the FBI's specific tactics, techniques, and procedures. These details are best addressed in a closed session. But I can assure the committee, we take every precaution to defend this information and the Americans that we serve. Looking ahead, events like the 2026 FIFA World Cup and 2028 Olympic Games in Los Angeles will draw global attention and raise the stakes. At the same time, UAS technology is becoming more accessible, cheaper, and more capable, making high-profile events attractive targets. The FBI cannot face this threat alone. The entire U.S. government, along with our state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement partners, must have the right tools and authorities in place. The 2018 Preventing Emerging Threats Act gave the FBI critical, but limited, authority to detect and mitigate credible UAS threats in the protection of special events, mass gatherings, emergency response and security functions, active federal law enforcement investigations, and our personnel and facilities. Under that authority, and with the necessary coordination and approvals, the FBI has conducted 80 missions, detecting over 1,200 UAS in violation of federal law. We've halted hundreds of unauthorized flights, either through direct contact with the pilot or by using technical countermeasures. We strictly adhere to all privacy and civil liberties protections outlined in the statute and Attorney General guidelines. Importantly, the FBI's Counter-UAS program is not a national rapid response force. Our resources are limited and prioritized to support only the highest risk operations. With more than 90,000 special events held annually across the country, we must adopt a whole-of-government approach. That includes expanding authority to enable state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement partners to fully protect their communities. We strongly support the Department of Justice efforts to pursue this expansion swiftly and with appropriate safeguards. With congressional backing, the FBI is ready to train and certify our law enforcement partners to carry out this mission responsively and effectively. We also urge a long-term expansion of the authority. Short-term renewals make it difficult to plan, budget, and staff a sustainable program. A durable extension would allow the stability needed to maintain readiness and enable thoughtful, long-term growth of the program. In closing, the FBI remains fully committed to protecting the American people from the threat of malicious and unauthorized drone activity. Reauthorizing this legislation is absolutely essential to maintain our protective capabilities and ensure we get and stay ahead of the threat. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Durbin, and distinguished members of the committee, I'm honored to testify regarding the Department of Homeland Security's authority to counter threats from unmanned aircraft systems and the need to reauthorize and expand this authority. As we approach the 24th anniversary of the September 11th attacks, I'm thankful to be here today to discuss the ways we can improve our collective ability to prevent a drone-specific catastrophic event. And I think I speak for my colleagues here when I say none of us want to end up back in this room to talk about what we could have done differently following an incident. Since 2019, DHS has judiciously and effectively implemented its Counter-UAS authority to protect our homeland while ensuring the protection of privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties. DHS has performed nearly 1,500 deployments of Counter-UAS equipment to protect covered facilities or assets, all without infringing upon First and Fourth Amendment rights of U.S. citizens. However, DHS and DOJ's authority to detect and counter drone threats will expire September 30th of this year, as the chairman mentioned. And we need urgent congressional action to ensure that the continued protection of our nation. Conflict zones across the globe are the new proving grounds for drone tactics and technological developments, and these innovations are only limited by an operator's imagination. Air supremacy is no longer determined by fighter jets and helicopters, but by rather a combination of traditional assets and unmanned systems. And this revolution is not restricted to war zones. Malicious actors in our backyard and across the homeland are finding new ways to use drones to facilitate criminal activity. Nearly every day, transnational criminal organizations use drones to convey illicit narcotics and contraband across U.S. borders and to conduct hostile surveillance of law enforcement. In the last 6 months of 2024, over 27,000 drones were detected within 500 meters of the U.S. southern border, operating nearly 60,000 unique flights, the majority of which were conducted at night or at restricted altitudes. U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents and officers have seized thousands of pounds of narcotics, including enough fentanyl to kill tens of thousands of Americans. Across the globe, drones have also been used increasingly to conduct kinetic attacks. Warring cartel functions have attacked one another using drone-delivered explosives, and it's only a matter of time before Americans or law enforcement are targeted in the border region. In Ukraine and Russia, the extensive use of drones in the ongoing war has further demonstrated their lethality and versatility. The success of Operation Spiderweb speaks volumes to the possibilities, and as my colleagues here can attest to, the threat of weaponized UAS attacks is also a concern right here in the United States. Drones have also caused significant and dangerous interference with manned aviation, resulting in major damage to aircraft, disruption to aircraft operations, and economic harm. Since 2021, the Transportation Security Administration has reported over 3,000 drone events near U.S. airports, some of which have led to operational disruptions of commercial air traffic. Already this year, 11 aircraft have reported taking evasive action to avoid colliding with drone, and in 2 instances, drones have collided with aircraft conducting critical response operations during emergencies in California and Texas. The trends are clear. Drone activity will continue to increase, and operators will find new and novel ways to use this technology for good and for bad. Any lapse in our authority would expose DHS missions and the American public to risks from drone attacks and hostile surveillance activities. We would no longer be able to secure our borders, and federal facilities and assets will be left vulnerable. A lapse will create critical security gaps in high-risk areas, hinder strategic planning, and jeopardize national preparedness for major upcoming events such as the 2026 FIFA World Cup, America's 250th anniversary celebrations, and the 2028 Olympic Games. Ensuring our Counter-UAS authority persists is priority number 1, but the conversation doesn't stop there. It's time for this authority to evolve to ensure that we can keep pace with this dynamic threat. The explicit inclusion of the Transportation Security Administration and U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement as authorized components would help address critical gaps at the federal level, but the reality is that we need state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement partners to serve as force multipliers in their jurisdictions. These groups currently lack the authority needed to deploy advanced UAS detection and mitigation systems, despite their responsibility for the protection of local events and infrastructure. Additionally, DHS and other departments lack the ability to help each other respond to UAS events. Authorizing mutual support between federal entities will immediately allow us to increase our collective capacity to deal with UAS threats nationwide. Our statutory authority and operational implementation must remain as dynamic as the threat we are facing, and this can be accomplished in a responsible and proven manner that balances security needs with safety expectations. Obtaining a durable, long-term extension of our current authority is essential for DHS to continue performing its protection missions, but the authority must also be expanded to keep pace with the numerous UAS threats our nation faces. Thank you again for the chance to testify today, and I look forward to your questions.
You have it turned on?
Yeah. You can't.
She can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? I can get closer, I bet. We got on the Democrat side disorder, Durbin, Klobuchar, Blumenthal. On the Republican side, Grassley, Cornyn, Blackburn, Britt, Moody, Schmidt, and Hawley. I'll start. 5-minute rounds. Mr. Willoughby, we all know the federal government can't be everywhere at once. So please tell us how expanded counter-drone authority for state and local law enforcement would support your department's efforts and enhance overall public safety.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, for the question. Really, as you mentioned, the federal presence is limited in its capacity, and we require participation from state and local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement entities to provide the security within their local and state jurisdictions. As Mr. Torphy mentioned, there are tens of thousands of events nationwide that go unprotected from the threat of UAS. And the state and locals within those jurisdictions are ultimately responsible for protecting games, whether it's a college football game in Iowa or an airport in Chicago. The state and locals, again, are the primary first responders to prevent and respond to an incident. And in giving them the authority to detect and potentially mitigate drones would enhance our collective ability as law enforcement and public safety officials to deter and defend against those types of threats.
Okay. Mr. Hardee, drones continue to proliferate, as we know. We need to ensure that our criminal laws keep pace with technology. Can you identify a few major gaps in our criminal code or other laws that need to be addressed to keep up with the emerging threat?
Thank you, Senator. As I indicated in my statement, we have supported your past legislation, the Drone Act, which covers some of the key areas that we view as gaps. The first would be weaponization of drones. Currently, it is generally a civil offense to weaponize a drone. We believe there should be a more comprehensive approach to that, and it should be a felony. The second area is prohibiting knowingly flying drones into protected airspace. That is also now a misdemeanor. Even taking photos of a sensitive DoD facility is a misdemeanor. So that is an area that we also believe should be addressed in additional criminal laws. The third area is the using of drones to interfere with aircraft, airports, vessels, and vehicles. There's currently fragmentary coverage now in the criminal code, and the penalties are generally inadequate. The fourth, which is also addressed in your past legislation, would be using drones to transport contraband into places like prisons. That is an increasing threat and a risk, and we're seeing it on more and more cases of that across the country. Fifth area would be criminalizing or making a felony the impairment of drone identification information. That's going to be a foundation for integrating drones into the U.S. airspace. And then the last area would be using drones to impair with emergency response activities. That's another area where the criminal code is fragmentary. There are some provisions for interfering with wildlife suppression operations or others, but it's not comprehensively addressed, and the penalties are generally inadequate. So those are the main areas. I mean, those reflect your good work in the past legislation, and we're willing to work with you and the rest of the committee to scope those provisions and ensure that we do it appropriately and cover all the different areas that we really need to cover. Thank you.
Mr. Torphy, some privacy advocates suggest that law enforcement should be required to secure a warrant prior to detecting or mitigating a drone that may threaten public safety. Speaking from your hands-on experience, is this a reasonable suggestion? If not, why not?
Thank you for the question, Chairman. Unfortunately, that is not a realistic possibility in actual operations. Our operators have often mere seconds to determine whether a drone presents a credible threat. The warrant requirement would also require specificity of the target that we are attempting to detect, track, identify, and potentially mitigate. And we do not know that in advance, right? We are a safety net. Our operations, our personnel and equipment serve as that last ditch safety net to protect special events and other covered facilities. So that is not a realistic expectation.
Mr. Willoughby, can you describe your department's process of coordinating with Federal Aviation Administration and other agencies to ensure that counter-drone resources are employed safely and responsibly? And then that'll be my last question.
Absolutely. Every piece of equipment for every deployment at every bespoke location is coordinated directly with the FAA and potentially with the NTIA or FCC as appropriate. It's important for us to maintain that close coordination with the Federal Aviation Administration because our security efforts must go hand in hand with the protection of the NAS and to be good stewards of the commercial air traffic and the others that are operating in the airspace. It's critical that we maintain that relationship, the framework for which was developed as part of the 2018 Preventing Emerging Threats Act. And we hope to continue that framework in the event that our authority is extended and then also expanded to others. We expect them to be held to the same standard.
Thank you all for answering my questions, Senator Rubin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Torphy, you've piqued my curiosity. 90,000 special events, you say, in a year? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
If you determine there is a malicious drone overhead at one of these events, what do you do to mitigate the threat?
Well, to be clear, there's over 90,000 special events this past fiscal year. Our team is present at an extremely, extremely small number of those. Only the absolute highest risk special events, things like the Super Bowl, the Indy 500, et cetera, are the type of events that we are present at.
Understood.
Yeah. At those events, nearly every mission we do, we see people violating the law. We provide fair notice. We implement flight restrictions.
How do you provide notice? Do they file flight plans?
We proactively coordinate with the FAA to implement a flight restriction, and that is published on the internet and on the devices that the pilots use to fly their drones. So sometimes it's even geofence, where the drone manufacturer will provide some level of software barrier where they can't fly into that area, but that does depend on the drone manufacturer.
But how do you mitigate it? How do you stop it? It's flying over Wrigley Field. He's not authorized. What's next?
Yeah, for the events that we are providing coverage, again, very, very small and inadequate amount of these events. We use a variety of technologies to detect, track, identify, and then if absolutely necessary, technically mitigate. We have two forms of mitigation. One would be the use of what we call ground intercept teams, which are FBI agents and law enforcement officers that make physical contact with the pilot. Again, using, in often cases, the authority provided in the statute to get that good detection technology, that pilot location, and we dispatch.
But if this is a bad actor, that doesn't sound to me like they'd be providing information to our government on how to reach them.
Well, that is option one, sir. And then option two, if absolutely necessary, we'll use those technical countermeasures, right? Equipment that we use specifically designed to disrupt the drone signal. And I can't get into the details of all of that, but we have a very good success rate using that technology, again, when absolutely necessary. We've had drones go right up to the edge of halftime games for Super Bowls and such, and we've been successful in repelling those.
Maybe we'll do a classified briefing, learn a little more.
It'd be my pleasure.
In the process. Mr. Willoughby, part of your testimony suggests that in some ways we are fighting the last war when it comes to narcotics in this country, which is a scourge and kills so many innocent people. And of course, we're mindful that individuals transport these narcotics with the simplest forms of communication and transportation, trucks and the like. But what you're suggesting is now they're flying these narcotics into this country. It's an amazing numbers. 27,000 drones were detected in the last 6 months of 2024. And you go through the various ways they are using to avoid detection in this situation. We just recently had a debate over a reconciliation bill where we're investing billions of dollars in detention facilities and new things that'll be built at the border to deal with the human trafficking back and forth over the border. How much is it going to take for us to deal with the drone threat that you've outlined very specifically?
It's going to take a lot. I'm going to be honest with you. We have a portion of the border that has persistent surveillance measures there, but the members of these cartels and these transnational criminal organizations, they're very smart, and they move their operations across the border to where operators either cannot interdict them or we don't have technology in place in a persistent basis. And it's going to take a significant amount of investment, both at the component level for U.S. Customs and Border Protection, as well as at the department level, to have enough equipment sporadically spread across the border to be able to detect drones operating across 2,000 linear miles of land.
This seems like a big undertaking. I'll just say for the record, now that we know that of those who are being deported in the mass deportation policy of President Trump, 8% have a criminal record, which means that 11 out of the 12 we are deporting do not have a criminal record, and yet we're going through all of the infrastructure necessary and process necessary to deport them. It seems to me that if we're going after real threats, current threats, and growing threats to the United States, we should divert some of this money from this mass deportation, which is only deporting people who overstayed a visitor's visa, for example, instead focusing on what you have identified as a scary prospect of all the 2,000-mile border that is vulnerable to these narcotics and other dangerous elements that are being sent into our country. So I would hope we do that. I yield Senator Cornyn. I think you're taking over.
Thank you all for being here, and my comments will not reflect on you or your organization at all, but I do think it's important for Congress and the American people to understand the nature of this threat. I'm not the only one who's been at a sporting or entertainment event recently that's seen the incredible use of drones operating sort of like an orchestra. And doing things that sort of years ago perhaps we could only imagine. But the fact of the matter is that we are not prepared for this technology. The truth is, like every technology, it can be used for good or ill. But the fact is, and I think Mr. Willoughby, you mentioned the Operation Spiderweb, that the Ukrainians used against the Russian Federation in June of 2025, where they literally transported hundreds of drones and vehicles to evade air defense systems, but then release the drones on cue to attack and then bomb a fleet of Russian bombers, knocking out a significant percentage of their bombing fleet. I was reflecting on your testimony when I was also thinking about a little over a year ago, President Trump was a target of an assassination attempt. The Secret Service, who's not represented here today, when we asked them about drones, apparently the shooter had a drone and used that for purposes of surveillance before he actually got in place and took the shot. And I asked about anti-drone technology for the Secret Service, and they said they had none. They're present. And their own drones were apparently not operational for some reason. It is true that the Iranian regime currently has a death warrant out for President Trump, and the FBI has interrupted and disrupted a number of assassination attempts against President Trump. Isn't that right, Mr. Torphy?
The FBI has thwarted many attack plots using drones and otherwise, and we believe that is the FBI doing what the FBI does best: intelligence, investigations, undercover operations, and only when all else fails, we have the technical countermeasures to protect tactical events.
Well, the FBI does good work, But as you point out, with 90,000 special events around the country each year, you can't be everywhere, and you depend on state and local officials to help out. We saw that actually at Butler, Pennsylvania, a little over a year ago, but when the Secret Service delegated its responsibilities to protect the President of the United States, obviously that failed to accomplish that objective. But it strikes me, Mr. Willoughby, that given this incredible technology that the Ukrainians demonstrated just this summer against the Russians, that we are not prepared to deal with this threat to either at a mass sporting event or entertainment event, or even to protect the President of the United States if an adversary decided to use drone swarms to do him harm. Do you agree with me?
I do think it comes down to capacity, which is why, we continue to reiterate the need for additional entities that can operate this type of equipment and protect within their jurisdictions the events and the citizens that are there.
Yeah, it's not, I know Mr. Hardee and Mr. Torphy had talked about authorities, but of course those only are useful once something bad happens. An investigation occurs, a prosecution occurs. But when it comes to actually preventing harm to the American people, whether it's a sporting event, entertainment event, or even at a rally like the one at Butler, Pennsylvania, it strikes me that a determined adversary has all the tools they need using drone technology to accomplish their goal. And we're not prepared to deal with that at this point. You're right? Is that correct?
Yeah, again, I think the authority does afford us the opportunity to gain the needed air domain awareness, right? You can't stop a threat that you don't know is there, right? You don't know a drone is there unless you have the advanced detection equipment there alongside a trained operator to be able to differentiate a media drone from a bad drone or an adversarial drone. And so again, just to re-echo the sentiment that we can't be everywhere all the time, and there are ways for us to improve our own operations, to include the Secret Service and other components. But we need additional partners to be able to tackle this type of threat scenario. If Operation Spiderweb were to occur domestically here, we would need additional partners out there to be able to identify and then prevent those drones from carrying out their attack.
Well, Senator Moody, like I, was Attorney General of our states, large states, and we worked, of course, with not only federal partners, but also state and local partners. And when you talk about resource constraints, that defines really the way that state and local partners operate. So it's the federal government that has the resources, but again, I know this is not intended as a criticism of any of you or your organizations, but it just strikes me we are woefully unprepared, and I know the state and local authorities don't have the resources they need in order to deal with this potential threat either. So this is not just a question of having the proper authorities and prosecuting people who violate those laws that we may pass, but then operationally, how do we prevent the harm that this new technology is capable of inflicting?
I think we have a bipartisan consensus that Senator Moody is next. Or is it Senator Britt?
Well, thank you. I always love it when I get to butt ahead of my colleague here, Katie Britt. I appreciate your deference. And thank you to leadership of the committee and the Judiciary staff. I know that a lot went into preparing this hearing, and this is our second hearing that we're holding on drones in a very short period of time, and I think that speaks volumes to the importance of this issue to our national security and our domestic security. So I thank the witnesses for being here, and certainly the staff that worked hard to get this hearing ready. And I think we are all cognizant that whether it's border operations or trying to tackle the issue of transnational criminal organizations using drones, or certainly those that have come into our country under purported lawful means, but now using drones to surveil really critical infrastructure to our national security. And it is happening very frequently. This could not be more timely. and us quickly adopting improved laws to address these risks, I think is so important. I have been focusing very much on students coming into our country on visas and then getting a hold of drones and using them to surveil our military bases. And I was just running through some of those recently. Over and over again, we're seeing them. One was caught using a drone in Virginia, videoing a U.S. Navy base. He was a student. One was caught in my own state, surveilling Patrick Space Force Base. Another in Los Angeles, flying a drone over Vandenberg Space Force Base. I mean, I can go on and on. And at some point, we've got to acknowledge our laws may not be sufficient, and specifically as it relates to videos. We just, a couple months ago, caught a Chinese-born Canadian citizen on a visa in our country, flying a drone over Port Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, my home state. They searched his drone afterwards and found that he had flown it 9 times, taking 2,000 videos within a span of a few days. The documents that were released in the Middle District of Florida showed that 13 videos showed military infrastructure at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station that included roads, power distribution infrastructure, security checkpoints, mission control infrastructure, fuel storage facilities, munitions storage areas, space launch complex, payload processing facilities, a submarine wharf, among other critical infrastructure. When that man was charged, they could not charge based on the videos because video is not included in the Drone Espionage Act of something that can be charged. And so as this routine and the frequency of people taking videos of our military installation picks up, it is clear to me there needs to be an update to our Drone Espionage Act. That seems to be front and center. That we could do right now to make a change in our laws to address this evolving technology. I introduced critical legislation after this committee's hearing in May that would strengthen that existing statute to include videography of sensitive national defense sites as a crime under the Espionage Act of 1917, and that would close that loophole. This is not only happening in Florida. Like I said, this is going to be of a concern to all of us on the judiciary that have military installations in our state. I happen to have 21 in Florida, and numerous have been videoed by people here that should not have been taking video of our installations. So I think it's critical that we as policymakers take this very seriously, not only the warnings that you're giving us very clearly, but being efficient and actually getting something done and changing our laws to reflect this evolving technology and the increased threats and risks. And it's not just hypotheticals, like we've said. We've seen would-be assassins flying drones. We're seeing right now people here in our country taking videos of our military installations that are here purportedly lawfully on visas. It has to stop, and they have to be charged, and we've got to close these loopholes. So I'll start with Mr. Hardee. As we've seen in several recent reports, including in the case I just mentioned, where a man took so many videos of our military infrastructure in Florida, how important is it that our infrastructure at our sensitive military installations be protected from drone surveillance in order to protect our national security?
Thank you, Senator. As I said in response to the question from Chairman Grassley, we strongly support a more comprehensive approach to creating felonies that would apply to airspace that is national defense airspace. And as you're aware from your comments, those are generally misdemeanors now. So the coverage is too narrow, and then the penalties are too low. And we would look forward to working with the committee on those issues and the issue that you raised with respect to the scope of the provision that applies to.
Well, at this moment, you can't even charge a misdemeanor if somebody takes a video of a critical military installation, correct?
Yes, we would definitely look forward to working with the committee on that particular statute, in addition to the ones that I had mentioned in response to the question from Chairman Grassley, which is an approach where we would be able to impose flight restrictions over certain facilities, and then you wouldn't have the issue of what was the person photographing, what was their intent. It would be a knowing violation of that airspace. So, so there are two ways to address that problem, and we would support looking at both of those, working with the committee.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Norrie. Senator Klobuchar?
Thank you, Senator Durbin. Thank you all for being here and for your work. I'll start with you, Mr. Willoughby. I'm concerned about the risks drone incursions present to commercial aviation. You know, I've seen good uses of drones in my state for crop management, pesticide application, civil engineers using it to look at bridges, or if we have some kind of a flood or a rail derailment where people don't know if it's safe or not. So I'm well aware that they can be used for good purposes. But as you noted in your written testimony, there have been over 160 reported drone incidents. This is near airports in 2025 alone. This has forced a dozen aircraft to take evasive action and has caused ground stops at major airports like Senator Durbin State O'Hare. How does DHS work with critical infrastructure operators like airport authorities to ensure we can keep the public safe? And do you need any additional authorities to protect planes, passengers, airports?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for the question. Right now, DHS is not able to use its counter-drone authority to protect airports in a proactive or persistent manner. The only case we would be allowed to use our existing authority would be in the event of an incident occurring and us performing some sort of federal investigation or emergency response after something has already happened. This is a critical gap, something that I mentioned in my oral remarks and are captured in the written statement as well. We need our Transportation Security Administration to have the explicit authority to be able to protect commercial airports as well as other transportation infrastructure from drone events.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Hardee, at our last hearing on this subject, I asked one of our witnesses who serves as a correctional officer about the risk drones pose to correctional facilities. That was one of the major topics just discussed. Your written testimony describes how drones have been used to introduce contraband, including weapons, drugs, cell phones, into BOP facilities. I've just heard from correctional officers in Minnesota who've described some of the challenges they face detecting drone incursions. What is the Justice Department doing to ensure that BOP facilities are able to detect and respond in real time? And I guess same question I asked of Mr. Willoughby, anything more we should be doing?
Thank you, Senator. The Bureau of Prisons has, to my understanding, established detection technology at, I think, all of its maximum security prisons and some of its medium security prisons. We're in the process of using the full authority of the 2018 Act to use the equipment that would include mitigation. So it is a critical issue, and the issue continues to grow. The types of contraband that are being shipped into these prisons using drones is more concerning. It's a problem that is expanding, and it's a problem that the states are facing as well. We have numerous criminal prosecutions where we have supported the states.
Any ideas of what we should do?
Well, reauthorizing the 2018 Act is the first step. That's absolutely critical. The second would be expanding the authority for state and locals to use the same types of technologies to protect their own prisons.
Very good. Yeah, we talked about that. And if you could thank the director, he came out to Minnesota and visited our facility in Duluth that has some lower level offenders and decided to keep it open. It was going to be closed. It just happened last week, and I really appreciate it. He talked to me first, and then he went out there, and it was a good decision in my mind. So thank you. Mr. Torphy, last question here. Federal law enforcement was able to disrupt a number of plots to use drones to attack critical infrastructure last year. This included thwarting plots to attack an FBI field office in Knoxville and an attack on the energy grid. What are some of the complexities involved in investigating plots that use weaponized drones, and are there additional authorities? Same question the FBI needs.
It is a rapidly evolving technological space and requires the full force of the federal government, and extremely important, as noted in the executive order restoring American airspace sovereignty, the integration of our joint terrorism task forces all over the country. So getting our state, local, tribal, territorial investigators and technical experts involved in our investigations is critically important. And bringing it back to the authorities, again, expanding their authorities allows them to get even better in this technical regard. We have leadership from coast to coast, from the LA County Sheriff's Office, New York City Police Department, New Jersey State Police, that are already using the equipment up to what they're allowed to use today, and the time is right for them to get to the next step.
Thank you. And thank you also, Mr. Torphy, if you could pass on the thanks to the FBI for the work in the murder investigation, the manhunt in Minnesota, and it was coordinated with state and local, but they did a really good job.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Klobuchar. Senator Britt?
Thank you so much to the chair and the vice chair for holding this hearing, and to all of the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Torphy, it's great to see you again. I've certainly enjoyed my time at Redstone Arsenal with you and Director Patel. Appreciate the briefing, and certainly hope that I encourage all of my colleagues to kind of go down and see firsthand the incredible work that you're doing. You and some of the experts at FBI Redstone also briefed us on technology developments and advancements which have made drones more lethal. And look, we know Redstone Arsenal is the epicenter of the FBI's technology, the capabilities and advanced training, and that we're going to play a central role in the FBI's strategy to combat these evolving threats of drones by providing the technological infrastructure and training facilities necessary to develop and implement effective counter-UAS strategies. What I want to know from you is how is the FBI keeping up with countering the technological advancements and increasing lethality of drones?
Thank you for the question, Senator, and it was a real pleasure to host you along with Director Patel and Senator Tuberville at the visit at Redstone just 2 months ago. It was great for you to meet our people that do this and see some of the equipment that we use. The Redstone is a big part of that for us, in that we have developed really strong relationships with the Department of Defense entities and contractor community down there. For example, the Program Executive Office Missiles and Space from the U.S. Army is right there up the street, and we have a budding memorandum of understanding with them for the validation of technologies that we can test in urban and suburban areas where we have that expertise, right? We deploy in places like New York City and Los Angeles, and we can provide that feedback back to the military. So it is just absolutely the perfect place for us to be doing this work. And with the investments that this Congress has made in those facilities and the Richard Shelby Center for Innovation and Advanced Technology, I've been able to see that facility grow in my 3.5 years living there. So it's about having that proximity to the other important parties in this space, and not just the Army, but with the other armed forces as well.
Yeah, the collaboration was really incredible. I'm interested, as you're looking at the increased number of threats, what additional authorities do you need to adequately address these concerns?
As stated in our written remarks, I think that the most important one that would deliver the most bang for the buck would be opening up the detection capabilities to all state, local, tribal, territorial, law enforcement, correctional institutions as well. Because as Mr. Willoughby said, it's very difficult to fight the enemy that you can't see. Mm-hmm. So we need visibility into the airspace. And now the FBI is not we don't monitor the airspace. We only deploy our equipment in very specific situations when there's an official need and an investigation that's occurring or a protection mission. And of course, we would expect the same from our law enforcement partners. So that is the most important thing. And of course, in the written record, we've laid out all of the important pieces.
And just quickly, when we're looking at cartels, we know Homeland Security has come out and done that threat assessment and looking at cartels using drones along the border. Is there anything in particular there that you think the Judiciary Committee needs to know, or do any state and local law enforcement need additional authorities to help us, help continue to be such good partners, but to help us combat that threat on the border?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. We're doing things with the Mexican government, the Mexican armed forces and law enforcement, trusted, vetted partners. We're sending people down there to train them on drone exploitation and the principles, again, not the specifics, but the principles of effective counter-UAS. And we are we're delivering best practices to them to keep them safer to fight the war, but then we're bringing back the things that they're learning in their country, because inevitably that will come into our country and we'll be better prepared. And through a training center and through the authorities delivered to the state and locals, we can then train them on what we are seeing in Mexico. So making that full link from what is happening from cartels in Mexico all the way to training state and local law enforcement in counter-UAS.
Got it. And last thing, and this is going to be for all of you. I'd like each of you to answer this. Mr. Willoughby, you brought this up. We've heard this obviously from both sides of the aisle. But as we look to what's ahead of us, whether that's the FIFA World Cup in 2026, whether that's the celebration of our nation, the 250th celebration there, whether it's the Olympics in 2028 in LA, or whether it's just football in the fall here, coming up in just a few months. Talk to me about where we are with regards to current laws governing counter-UAS authorities. Are they sufficient? Number one, are the laws sufficient to actually do what you need to and protect individuals in these types of environment? And then the follow-up question is, do you have the resources and the technology available to you at your agency that you need, or do you need something greater in order to be able to protect American citizens coast to coast? And I'd like for all three of you to answer this question. Go ahead, Mr. Willoughby.
Thank you for the question. I think from an authoritative perspective, those that have the authority right now have what they need in the current statute, and we'd like to see that extended for a much longer term so that they can continue to plan strategically and budget and train and resource appropriately for those events. As was mentioned, there are tens of thousands of events that go unprotected every year from these types of threats, and we can't be everywhere, right? The federal presence, whether that's FBI or one of the DHS components, we can't be at every event. We cover the Super Bowl, right? What about the other 200 plus NFL games that are happening every year? And we need our state and local partners who are there, charged with the protection of those stadiums in concert with these private groups at the stadiums, to be able to understand what's in the airspace through detection measures and then have some sort of recourse or countermeasure capability to protect those stadiums. And again, we'll never have enough federal agents to go out and protect every NFL game, every MLB game, which means we need to rely on. Yeah, we need to rely on these state and locals as these force multipliers out there. And so beyond just keeping what we have from an authoritative perspective, we also need to look at a responsible expansion to those state and locals, to other departments or agencies at the federal level who could assist with this and close some of those gaps.
Senator
Torphy?
Schmidt.
Oh, sorry.
Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on that, what is the nature, what is the extent of that mismatch of capabilities that exist between maybe federal and the state and local partners? So what's the difference between the Super Bowl versus, Mizzou, Alabama in October? What's the difference in capability there, and how concerned are you, number one, by that, and number two, what can be done about it?
The difference is, for the Super Bowl and other special events that federal partners are protecting, we have the full gamut of capabilities there that go deployed along with trained personnel who can act and respond to threats as they arise. Whether it's a NCAA football game or another NFL game during the regular season, that federal presence is not there, which means the resources and the capabilities and the countermeasures are also not there, right? And so stadiums and local jurisdictions are using what is within the realm of legal in the current framework, but it's inadequate for them to be able to detect the far range, the wide gamut of potential threats at these events. And as Mr. Torphy mentioned, there are nearly 90,000 special events that get nominated, for SEER recognition at the federal government level. Only a couple dozen of those rise to the level of national significance, where we have the determination that it would merit support for counter-UAS given our limited capacity, right? And so by enabling state and locals to use the same technology in the same responsible way, we're bolstering our general capacity from a law enforcement and security functionality.
And I would go ahead and continue on that, but while you're answering that, so let me ask this. So in the state, what is the best agent? Is it the Highway Patrol, or sort of like, is it this, if there's some state police, Missouri doesn't have the state police, you have the Highway Patrol. Are they the best ones to sort of be the conduit for this as we bridge these gaps? And then also, what role does the private sector play? Because I'm also on the Armed Services Committee, and what we're finding is that there's private actors in the marketplace that already do this really well that probably ought to be contracted with, as opposed to us trying to reinvent the wheel every time, so.
To get at your first question, Senator, the difference is absolutely stark between, the protection of the Super Bowl and most any other event in the United States, and the American people should be very concerned about that. These law enforcement agencies, they know their jurisdictions, they know their venues, and you've probably seen on television instances of drones hovering over the field. And you've seen the police officer in charge or the event organizer in charge looking at it and talking on his radio because there's nothing they can do about it. And that should be very concerning. There is a role for the private sector absolutely to play, and they're already playing that role, and of course the development of these amazing systems that are being developed. But perhaps in the protection of critical infrastructure, that's going to be a sustainable way forward.
What critical infrastructure do you think is most at risk currently?
I would defer that question to the Department of Homeland Security.
If I can, they're all at risk. Right. Every one of the sectors is vulnerable in some way to a drone threat, whether that's a chemical processing plant, an airport, a stadium, a federal facility, a prison. They're all vulnerable in their own unique way because you can use a drone to conduct some sort of criminal or nefarious activity. You're only limited by your imagination. It could be dropping a package into a jail yard. It could be interrupting or disrupting commercial air traffic. It could be connecting a explosive device and attacking an ammonium nitrate plant. The drone is just the mechanism, the delivery vehicle. And so really, they're all vulnerable in their own ways, to include cyber attacks, as the chairman mentioned.
Yeah, I can tell you that some more classified briefings, the ones that relate to drones are often the most concerning. Mr. Hardee, I don't have much time left, but I want to talk a little bit about the cartels and what's happening at the border. Have there been drone attacks on U.S. personnel by Mexican cartels?
I'm not aware of that, but I would defer to Mr. Willoughby on those questions relating to the border because they're closer to that.
Okay. I would have to circle back with you, but I can follow up to get you an answer.
And where are they typically acquiring their drones?
Walmart, Amazon, most of them are off-the-shelf products that you can get at any store, order online. You can also buy components and create it yourself through a DIY.
As we're talking about sort of the legal framework of how we can be more effective in deterring, what can be done on that front as far as limiting the procurement from individuals or cartel organizations?
It's a fine line to walk because, as was mentioned already, drones are used for many positive ways, right?
Yeah.
And it's very tough to determine intent from, a purchase point of view, if you will. I think by enhancing some of the regulations or left of launch initiatives that we have for Homeland Security purposes, that could go a long way in deterring or preventing the misuse of drones. And if you think about registration or pilot certification, enhancing our ways to share that information with law enforcement partners to ensure that that's being done appropriately and across the board, I think will go a long way. But the reality is, if you're a nefarious actor, you're not going to register.
So this is all terrifying, many of it. When I go back home, we got that piece. What is the thing to be most, what should be, what advances have we made in the last couple of years that we can take some solace in, knowing that there's a lot of work to do?
Absolutely. I mean, we're doing our best to keep pace from a countermeasure perspective. What we've done is, and Mr. Torphy can speak more to this later, it's a system approach, right? And so we have radio frequency detection systems, we have radars, we have electro-optical and infrared cameras that we can use, and all of this is pumping information to help our operators make the most informed decision on a case-by-case basis. And this often is a matter of seconds in a tactical situation. And as the technology improves and our ability to train and specialize operators, we've made tremendous headway in being able to differentiate good from bad and allow those that are flying authorized and compliantly in an area to continue to do so alongside our ability to stop and prevent those who are flying unauthorized or recklessly.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I am so pleased that you all are with us today. We do appreciate it. I want to stay on this issue with the drones and how they are used for good and for bad. One of the things that we are doing is seeing them used with our civil military fusion programs. And we are concerned about what is happening with the CCP, and they are manufacturing drones in the millions, and we are doing them in the thousands every year. And we know that China looks at this as an area where they are winning. And so, Mr. Hardee, let me come to you and talk a little bit about the importance of us innovating and winning that innovation and production race so that we have the drones that we need for law enforcement and for warfare.
Thank you, Senator.
Yeah.
That is a extremely important issue that we all recognize. The drones made from the People's Republic of China represent an extremely high share of the market of drones in the United States. President Trump's recent executive orders are one step in addressing that issue. There are different agencies working on the issues relating to the importation of drones that are from China and adversary jurisdictions. We take that into account in our procurement decisions, and I know other agencies within the federal government do as well. So that is something that we are monitoring, and we are trying to support the use of a secure domestic drone industrial base. Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Willoughby, I want to come to you, and I know Senator Britt touched on drones and events. And in Tennessee, we have a lot of big concerts, music festivals, sporting events, and we've had to work with the FAA to make certain that drones are not in certain areas during certain times. And I know this is, as you were talking about the ease with which people can commercially acquire a drone. And this issue becomes more pressing as you look at public safety in these events. So talk for just a moment about things that legislatively we can tackle to make certain that we are going to have a standard process for moving forward and securing these public events.
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for the question. Two main pieces. The first is that much as we've mentioned already, federal partners can't be at every event all the time. And so we need to enable those that protect these events day in and day out. Our state and local partners are empowered and authorized to be able to use the most advanced technology to understand what's in the airspace and then respond to it accordingly. This is not different than any other type of technology or vehicle that somebody might use to conduct criminal activity. If you wanted to drive a car into a crowd of people, then you put up a jersey wall or a bollard to prevent them from going there. We need to have the same mindset when it comes to drones as a normal part of our physical security parameters and considerations. And right now, they are not legally allowed to use the technology that's available out there on the marketplace for them to be able to prevent those types of attacks.
And what about drones manufactured in adversarial countries like China, in DJI drones?
It's a serious problem, as Mr. Hardee mentioned. They have an overwhelming share of the marketplace right now, and it's unclear exactly how this data is being protected, if at all, and who might be looking at it from an intelligence or a surveillance or reconnaissance perspective.
Yeah, Mr. Torphy, am I saying your name right?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. Smuggling drugs into state and federal prisons. And as I've talked with individuals that are handling prisons and prison populations, they've talked about the increasing use of these and the frustration with that. Can you talk about that and how we address that issue of smuggling drugs and contraband into prisons using drones.
Yes, Senator, thank you. And you had an excellent witness in the last testimony that addressed their concerns. That is prolific, absolutely prolific, federal, state, local correctional institutions. And the FBI gets after that primarily through our violent crime, drug, gang investigations. So we see those nexus and we action that with technical countermeasures when necessary. But again, it goes back to how do we get this equipment, and more importantly, these authorities to the folks that are actually protecting these facilities.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Before we adjourn, there's a couple cleanup things. While I was out voting on the Senate floor, there was some comments made about needing funding for drones. And maybe the people that brought that up don't realize that we included funding in the reconciliation bill recently passed by the Congress, and I assume that if that's not adequate, that the appropriators will be reviewing for the 26 fiscal year. And then I'd like to enter two letters in the record. The first is a letter from New York Governor Kathy Hochul to bipartisan congressional leadership. The letter reads in part, quote, the sunset of this authority puts the U.S. at risk, and this authority must be extended. The letter further calls for more robust federal counter-drone authorities and the expansion of these authorities to state and local law enforcement. The second is a bipartisan letter from Council of Governors to the Department of Defense and Homeland Security, and I'll partially quote from that letter. Across the nation, we have seen troubling incidents involving drones used for illegal surveillance, smuggling, and incursions over critical infrastructure, Department of Defense facilities, and state correctional institutions, end of quote. And then a further quote, in many cases, we lack the authority or tools needed to respond effectively. This is, as been stated here by almost everybody, a truly bipartisan issue, and I will put those letters in the record without objections. And then to thank all of you, and some of you suggested keeping in touch with me on our legislation. Don't wait for me to call you. If you call me, if there's some changes that you think need to be made, and if you got any strategy, feel free to do that. Oh, wait a minute. We have another member on the way, I was just informed. So we will give him the courtesy of asking his questions. Senator Schiff from California. Was he reasonably close, do you think?
Yeah, he's on the train.
What?
He's on the train. So
Oh, if he's on the train, we'll just wait, yeah.
The cruise team has some additional questions, but we haven't reviewed them. If you want to read any of those to buy time, it's up to you.
You want me to ask him now?
Well, I mean, I guess you could probably ask, like,
I can ask the first one.
yeah, maybe that one.
Okay,
Maybe. Yeah.
okay. While Senator Schiff's coming, I'll take advantage to something that wasn't covered. I'll ask it to any one of you that want to respond. Is it true that unauthorized drones flying near traffic crashes, fire scenes, and or disaster zones created hazardous conditions for both responders and civilians?
Yes, Chairman, I'll take that question. Just this year, there have been 2 incidents where drones have been flown in the vicinity of emergency response operations, one during the Palisades fire response in California, where a drone collided with a super scooper plane and took it out of commission for weeks during critical firefighting operations. And the second, most recently, down in Kerrville, Texas, during the flood response, a drone collided with a response helicopter, requiring it to land, and I believe it was also taken out of commission temporarily while damage was assessed and repaired. And these are just two examples that happened this year. There have been multiple instances of drones colliding or interfering with firefighting or emergency response or disaster relief operations. And it's of critical importance that we secure these areas beyond just establishing flight restrictions, but also empowering those who are public safety or security officials with being able to respond accordingly.
Then another question, is it true, is it true that criminal organizations use drones to smuggle drugs, weapons, and contraband across their southern border into correctional facilities?
Affirmatively, yes, for the border. I'll defer to my colleagues for the prisons part of it.
Chairman, yes, as stated, that's a prolific issue for the federal, state, local correctional institutions all across America. Happens every day.
Okay. We'll wait for Senator Schiff now. He's coming. Yeah. Senator Schiff, I'm calling on you now if you're ready. And we can wait a couple seconds if you aren't ready. But when you start asking your questions, I'll ask you to adjourn the meeting when you're done, because I have to go to another meeting.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the courtesy of holding the hearing open for me. I greatly appreciate it. And I will be ready in one moment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I recognize both the great value that UAV and drone technology have for law enforcement, and I can imagine innumerable productive and important uses, as well as the risks that drug cartels and others are using drones for their own nefarious purposes. But Mr. Willoughby, I wanted to ask you about a different kind of concern, and that is we saw drones being used by DHS over Los Angeles during protests. And my understanding is that DHS policy requires that there be privacy protections when drones are used and may capture people engaged in First Amendment protected activity, among other things. And that drone footage is not allowed to be released without a law enforcement purpose or some other legitimate, analyzed, and approved function. Nonetheless, drone footage that was captured over Los Angeles was published by the agency. Why was it published? Who made that decision? And how is that consistent with DHS policy that is supposed to protect the privacy of those that are caught by drone footage?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I'm not familiar with the use of drones for the positive law enforcement uses. My portfolio is strictly on countering the drone threats here in the Homeland, but I can circle back and get you an answer to those questions with your permission.
Yes, if you would, I would appreciate that. As I said, I can more than understand the legitimate law enforcement purposes, but also deeply concerned about privacy interests and chilling First Amendment protected speech. as this technology proliferates, we're going to have to make sure that we protect those vital interests of the American people. Let me ask you about a different issue then, and I'll open this up to the whole panel. We've repeatedly seen, as we've battled wildfires in California, that spectators using drones have interfered with the firefighting efforts. There have been collisions with aircraft. There have been other times where aircraft had to be brought out of the fight until they could disable a drone or find its owner or whatnot. How recurrent is that particular challenge? What is the state of the technology to be able to disable a drone in flight or to identify where the user of the drone may be?
Maybe I'll start and then turn it over to my colleagues afterwards. The use of drones in these emergency response areas, whether it's firefighting or disaster relief or search and rescue, is prolific. And nearly every national incident that we hear about, most in the recent past, there have been unauthorized drones flying into space, interrupting authorized manned or unmanned operations. And for the most part, out of a abundance of caution, those manned operations are halted when there's an unauthorized drone detected in the area, which can severely debilitate our ability to respond in a timely fashion. And the ability to stop or prevent a drone from going somewhere is really restricted by the current authority that we have that's limited to just certain federal entities. And unless one of those entities is there providing a counter-UAS protection mission, we would not be able to stop an unauthorized drone from proceeding into a restricted area, even if there was a flight restriction in place, which is often the case during these emergency responses. But I'll pause to see if my colleagues have anything else.
That's an excellent point, Senator, and I think it illustrates the need to expand these authorities to state and locals. I'll give you an example. In the Los Angeles field office has developed over many years a robust relationship with the LA County Fire, LA County Sheriff, LAPD with regard to protection of wildfire areas from drones. But there, as you know, can be multiple wildfires in the greater Los Angeles area at any given time. And as we stated, the FBI cannot be everywhere. So the time is now for these agencies to get these authorities to protect wildfires and other public safety events.
And if you could speak to the sort of the state of the art in terms of geofencing of drones, how capable is that of dealing with commercially available drones?
If you're referring to the geofencing on the drones themselves from the pilots, that is no longer really an applicable technology. Previously, some of the drone manufacturers did have some attempt to prevent people from flying into areas they shouldn't, and that has changed quite dramatically in the past 9 months. As far as our capabilities, we do have effective technologies, but there is no silver bullet in counter-UAS.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was supposed to adjourn, but I'm happy to turn it back over to Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As senators, our job is to anticipate, not react to, but anticipate emerging threats. Nobody expected flimsy Japanese fighters to sink America's battleships at Pearl Harbor. Nobody expected 19 hijackers with box cutters to turn passenger jets into missiles on 9/11. And today, I fear we're making the same mistake with drones. Nobody's expecting them to cause catastrophic damage. But sadly, it's only a matter of time. The drone was once a novelty. Now it is a weapon, a scout, a smuggler, a spy, a delivery system for terror. Drones pose an immediate and growing threat to our national security. They can attack civilians, smuggle deadly contraband, assassinate leaders, collide with planes, and destroy buildings. War has always foreshadowed the next generation of violence, and we see it with drones. What starts on the battlefield never stays there. It comes home. This is the face of modern warfare. Not a tank, not a missile, but a soldier holding a drone. In Ukraine, a soldier with a $400 drone can destroy a $4 million tank or a $100 million fighter jet. One drone operator can do more damage than an entire infantry squad. In Ukraine, drones have become the dominant tool of war, flooding the skies, destroying expensive war equipment, targeting civilians, and overwhelming defenses. We see the same in the Middle East. You're looking at the Iron Dome, intercepting rockets over Israel in 2021. But here's the lesson. Defense is never perfect. Even the most advanced missile shield in the world can be overwhelmed. That was 2021. On October 7th, 2023, Hamas blinded Israel's radar systems with swarms of drones, clearing the way for one of the most brutal terror attacks in a generation. And just months later, on April 13th, 2024, Iran launched over 300 drones and missiles in a coordinated kamikaze-style assault, the first of its kind. This isn't science fiction. This is the world that our enemies are building and bringing to our doorstep here at home. In 2018, 2 explosive drones nearly assassinated Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro during a live speech. In 2024, Thomas Crooks flew a drone over a Trump rally site for 11 minutes, scouting the grounds before his attempted assassination of President Trump. That same year, drones hovered over Naval Air Station Fort Worth for more than 2 hours, unintercepted. At our southern border, cartels now operate drone fleets, smuggling fentanyl, coordinating illegal crossings, and jamming U.S. surveillance. They've formed specialized drone units. They've dropped bombs. They've deployed jammers. Drones right now are outpacing our law enforcement at every turn. In our prisons, drones drop weapons, phones, and fentanyl, arming inmates and fueling the deadliest drug epidemic in American history. And here's the most damning part. Cartels right now have more drone capability than American law enforcement. Let me repeat that. Cartels today have more drone capability than American law enforcement. Mr. Hardee, you work at the intersection of law and policy regarding drones at the DOJ. Is it true that only a handful of federal agents under narrow legal authority can intercept or disable a drone?
Thank you, Senator. That is generally true under the 2018 Act that gives DHS and DOJ authority to conduct detection and mitigation operations. That law limits those protection missions to protecting particular facilities and particularly specified missions under very, very detailed requirements. And it only applies to DHS and DOJ. It does not give authority for state and locals.
So to flush that out, is it also true that state and local police, the men and women on the front lines every day, are legally barred from taking actions, even when a drone is hovering over a school, a stadium, or another significant location?
It could depend on the particular facts in an extreme situation, but generally they are not authorized under the law to use the types of detection technology that could implicate laws like the Wiretap Act, and there's also prohibitions potentially under the Aircraft Sabotage Act and other laws that apply to them. Each case would have to be looked at on its particular facts, but there is a lack of clarity in the law that inhibits their operations and investment in that kind of technology and their cooperation with FBI and DHS to engage in the training and to develop the types of approaches to this problem that expanding their authority would allow.
Well, let me be clear. The current state of the law limiting the ability of law enforcement to act proactively to protect people's lives and safety from drone attacks is utterly insane and unacceptable, and we need to address that and correct it. The current state of the law means that a Texas sheriff today has fewer tools to stop a hostile drone than the cartel lieutenant does launching it from across the river. It means a police officer can watch a drone deliver fentanyl, but has limited authority to stop it. If Congress fails to act, the consequences will not be theoretical. They will be measured in lives lost, drugs delivered, and attacks perpetuated against our nation. As the chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee, which has jurisdiction over aviation, and as a longtime member of this committee, the Judiciary Committee, which has jurisdiction over criminal law, I've seen this threat from both sides. Mr. Willoughby, as Deputy Director of the Counter-UAS program at DHS, you are at the cutting edge of drone mitigation planning. What are the current legal and jurisdictional challenges between agencies, as well as between federal and local law enforcement, regarding mitigating drone threats?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I think to your first point about between federal agencies, there currently lacks any sort of mutual support provision for DHS to help DOJ or DOD and vice versa, even when we are co-located in high-risk areas. Think about the southern border or dense metropolitan areas. If Mr. Torphy were to say, Steve, I need your help mitigating this drone, I would have to say, sorry, I can't help you under the current framework of the law. Now, there are exceptions to that, but what we're looking for is some sort of explicit mutual support provision that would allow DHS, DOJ, DOD, and other entities that may be brought into the fold to be able to help each other, recognizing that there's limited capacity and it requires a specialized and trained person to be able to operate this equipment.
So what specific steps should Congress take to keep up with and prevent the threats posed by drones? And I want each of you to address that.
Just starting from an authoritative perspective, we need more cooks in the kitchen, which is not a phrase I use lightly. We need more entities out there with trained personnel, with the capabilities, with the countermeasures to be able to detect and then mitigate drones if they pose risk to their jurisdictions. We at the federal level, we can't be everywhere all the time. I mean, just using the border as an example, it's 2,000 miles of linear border, and we have to work closely with our state and local partners for a range of law enforcement activity, and drone response should be no exception. Think about the Department of Public Safety down in Texas. We work hand in hand with them from a border security perspective, but we can't work with them from a drone interdiction perspective, right? And that needs to be rectified, and empowering those state and locals to do that would be top of mind for us.
Thank you for the question, Senator. We've touched on some of these points. I think you touched on another, which is that there's really no framework, and I fear that there's a slipping away from the law enforcement community and a confusion, the private sector, about what is legal and who can do what under what circumstances, and you've seen hints of that today. And so passage of legislation to make this very clear is absolutely essential, and that will depend on the setting of a security framework and, critically, the training and certification of these law enforcement officers. Thanks to the seed that was planted through the executive order, the Restoring American Airspace Sovereignty Executive Order, June 6th, it directed the FBI to establish the National Training Center. And so that seed has been planted, and we're going to run our first Counter-UAS course in October for select state and local law enforcement with a priority on the FIFA World Cup jurisdictions. Now, this is just detection because we cannot train them on anything having to do with the statute because they're not allowed to implement those authorities. But the FBI has taken that step, and we are ready to go.
Senator, as my colleagues have said, we need legal clarity, at the bare minimum, a reauthorization of the 2018 law, but also an expansion of those authorities to state and local so we can work together in training and creating the kind of system in the community of interest where we can improve and expand these technologies. The other issue that we support this committee examining is ensuring that we have a comprehensive approach in the criminal code for drone offenses.
As the Chairman of Commerce, which has jurisdiction over the FAA and aviation issues, I recognize the risk that poorly operationalized counter-UAS efforts could pose to civilian aircraft, especially near airports. How do you believe that we can harmonize the need to mitigate the drone threat while keeping commercial aviation safe? Mr. Willoughby?
It's a partnership with the FAA, and it has been since 2018 when we got these original authorities, and it has maintained over the course of the last 7 years. Every deployment is coordinated with the FAA. Every piece of technology at every location, we share with them, we coordinate with them, and we do our best to minimize and mitigate any impacts to the national airspace system while we're using this equipment. And we recognize that there's often competition between our need to conduct these security operations and to maintain that safety apparatus on the FAA side. And it's been a work in progress over time to the point where we have such a great relationship right now where we have individual points of contact that we can reach out to at a moment's notice to get any sort of last-minute operation approved and to deconflict any issue that they may be having operational.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. This has been very helpful. It is the solemn duty of Congress not merely to react to evil once it strikes, but to anticipate it, to see the world not as we wish it to be, but as our enemies are planning it, and to stay one step ahead of the darkest hearts on earth. Drones will be used by our enemies. If Congress fails to act on the threat of drones, the consequences will not be theoretical. They will be measured in lives lost, drugs delivered, and horrific attacks perpetuated against our nation. If Congress doesn't act to stop this threat, who will? This concludes our hearing. I want to thank each witness for taking the time to share your personal experience, your expertise, and your perspectives with us. Written questions can be submitted for the record for 1 week from today, and I'll ask the witnesses to answer and return the questions to the committee within 2 weeks of receiving the questions. And with that, this hearing is adjourned.